a lot of these recruits to apparently forego some sleep in order to be there on Saturday. I think that's pretty commendable, to be honest with you. Let's see what else is going on. Our buddy Jermaine King, by the way, wait till y'all see Jermaine's golden shoe. This is like an unbelievable work of art. I mean, this is like an NFT. We got a really good one from him. Our buddy Forestry Dog has kind of outdone himself this time around. We're going to do like 6 golden shoes later on today because it is that kind of Friday here around Dog Nation. Let's see what else is going on. And we'll get ready to start the regular show in a couple of minutes. Wayne Hunter says, nice tribute to Sam Pittman last night on cover, and he uses parentheses for 3. Our buddy Jeff was off last night. Jeff actually got a chance to go to the Braves game last night, so he had a chance to enjoy that. I don't think I'm outing him by saying that. And so he had a chance to go do that, and he did. And so there were just the 3 of us last night. And yeah, we were talking about the Sam Pittman stuff. And what I was doing is I'd been kind of trying to think about how to explain what I think Pittman means to Georgia. And sometimes it's kind of hard to put it into words, but we kind of talked about, at least in my mind, kind of where he might rank among previous Georgia assistants and how influential he was in the 2017 team that made the Rose Bowl, won the college football playoff game, and played for a national championship. I mean, ultimately, I think one of the things, and, it'd be great to one day really examine this more deeply, but I think one of the things that was really important for Pittman was in that transition that Kirby Smart made from being Alabama defensive coordinator in the 2015 season, staying around there and helping Alabama win a national championship, and then taking the Georgia job full-time after that. That was really pretty successful for Kirby. You could make a case for all the recruiting success that Kirby Smart has had. One of the accolades that he might not quite get enough credit for is he may have signed the best class in 2016 that any rookie head coach had ever signed, right? What did it finish? 6th, 7th, 8th? I forget. It was somewhere in the top 10, kind of bottom half of the top 10. You could make a case that was the best class a rookie coach had ever signed. He held it together while he was only working part-time, and he's hiring his staff and putting that together while he's still working at Alabama. And there was a way that could have maybe not gone so well, right? There was a way that could have been a little bit too much. You may have kind of collapsed under the weight of all of that. And it didn't really happen. And I give Sam Pittman a lot of credit for that too, because part of putting a staff like that together is you got to find your bedrock members, and then you got to kind of build around that. And Kirby pretty clearly had a plan. He wanted Sam Pittman, and he was going to build his offensive staff around Pittman. Pittman was going to have a person on the org chart higher than him, the offensive coordinator, but that offensive coordinator was going to be selected on the basis of who might work well with Sam Pittman. And so when you think about the organizational structure that Georgia took on pretty quick back there as 2015 turned to 2016, Pittman gets a lot of the credit for kind of how that played out the way that it did. So, yeah, I mean, in addition to the fact that I just love his personality and I want college football to be a little bit more like what Sam Pittman is at Arkansas right now, I also think that he was really pretty pivotal in the early success that Georgia enjoyed. Richard D's on the idea of having a guest on cover 4 when we only have the 3. So we've done that before, and I like that. I have to tell you, though, and maybe I'm weird about this, which is never to say I'd want to kick anybody off the show. I think, though, that there is something kind of cool when 4 turns into 3. I think everybody has to speak a little bit more, which for me is, not that big of a deal. Obviously, I run my yap all the time. But I think there's kind of a neat chemistry that can form when all of a sudden now it's 3 people talking instead of 4. So in some respects, doing the show with 3, I think is actually kind of fun. We don't do that very much because the show's called Cover 4, but I actually kind of like doing it with 3 sometimes. John Hendricks says, and we can go ahead and bring on the other platforms if we haven't already. Oh, we're on the other platforms? Okay, cool. All right, we're going to get ready to start here on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. Let me read a couple more comments. John Hendricks says, how cool is it we can watch College Game Day tomorrow in Athens, then roll right into our game at noon with Kirk and Chris bringing us the action? Yeah, it's a huge commercial. I saw where Kirk Herbstreit has said that Georgia is going to be featured, not just as the host of the show, the venue for the show, but the Georgia defense is going to be highlighted with a special package on Saturday. I think you're going to enjoy this. I think for those of you who are watching it on TV, you're going to get your fill of a lot of red and black highlighted in a huge way there on ESPN. And, the noon start may have been the sleepy time before, but I don't think anything about Athens on Saturday is going to feel sleepy at all. In fact, why don't we get ready to start that way right now? Loaded show for us. Jeff Sintel on all the elite recruits who are planning on being there. There is major controversy around the SEC at a couple of different spots. Georgia rivals all, And I think it sets up juicy subplots for some of the other SEC games on Saturday. We'll touch on that. I'll explain in today's show why, even though Georgia's opponent on Saturday is Arkansas, they are also, to a degree, competing with Alabama as well. We'll do that. I'll have a brief word on how Georgia fans should interpret some of the things being said about Clemson as of late and why, in a weird way, this might actually be good for UGA. But before we do any of that, very simple point off the top. What do I want to see from Georgia against Arkansas on Saturday? What would be the major statement the Dogs could make in this top 10 matchup at home? Let's begin right there as DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Kroger, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Let me finish the week kind of where I started it. If you'll go back to Monday's show, one of the things you'll remember from me was I talked about the influence that guys like Vince Dooley and Larry Munson have had on me, the way they used to talk about Georgia games and Georgia opponents, and it just seemed very appropriate for them to talk up the opponent and sometimes talk down their own team. Coach Dooley as the coach, Larry Munson as the kind of, very emotional voice, the narrator of that experience for the rest of us as fans, me as a very young fan, some of you as a little bit older there at the time, and you just remember the way in which they kind of brought a kind of a tinge of pessimism into the discussion, and I think a lot of us have been kind of clouded by that, and I mean that in a complimentary way. Those guys just had a very, and Coach Dooley even to this day kind of maybe still like that. Those guys back then just kind of had a very special way of talking about Georgia football, and I think that's had influenced a lot of us. And the question I kind of asked out loud on Monday was, as a Georgia fan, have you earned the right, or has this team earned the right to allow you to feel confident going into a game like this? The betting houses, such as our friends at BetUS, say that you should. Georgia's more than an 18-point favorite on Saturday. And yet there's still this kind of thought of, yeah, but are we heading for a letdown? Yeah, but is it going to be quite that easy for Georgia? Sometimes it seems like things aren't quite that easy. And I was telling our video audience before our regular show began a moment ago that trying to think about what the right word for me to describe myself is going into tomorrow's game. I don't know if confident is necessarily that, but I am certainly optimistic. And then what I'm optimistic of is that by the time the game is done, maybe Georgia will have earned from me, from the other people who were tuned in to watch, maybe Georgia will have earned the kind of confidence that I'd love to see Dog fans have, where going to big games like this, there isn't the need to think about all the things that could go wrong, or there isn't the need to think about the other shoe dropping, that Georgia can be like some elite programs have been the last couple of years, where their fans show up on a Saturday actually assuming that things are going to go well and actually assuming that Georgia's going to flex itself a little bit in front of a national television audience. For instance, I'll give you a number here. I thought this was kind of interesting. Let me show you this on the screen. So ESPN, its stats and info put out on Twitter this week based on like their FPI data and stuff like that Georgia currently has the best chance, according to ESPN stats and info, to win this year's national championship. According to ESPN, they have a 36% chance of winning the title. That's better than 1 in 3. Ahead of Alabama at 34%. And then you get to like Oklahoma at 9%. Ohio State, Michigan both at 4%. But Georgia way out in front of everybody else. And I have to admit, while I guess that's somewhat statistically interesting, I don't know that emotionally I've really bought into that yet. I would say clearly Georgia could win the national championship, but will they win the national championship? Do I feel do I feel as confident as ESPN's nerds do that are crunching those numbers that it's a better than 1 in 3 chance? Boy, I don't quite know if I'm there quite yet, but Saturday could go a long way towards getting me there. And I think for those of you who try to keep a somewhat realistic appraisal of the situation when it involves Georgia, I think Saturday provides for Georgia a tremendous opportunity to make a statement to those of us who watch this team very closely, but also make a statement to those of us or maybe outside the bubble of DawgNation, those folks who kind of haven't seen Georgia quite as close, but because of the noon start, because of the hype for this game, ESPN College Game Day leading into it, they're tuned in to find out, well, just how good is this Georgia team this year? Let me click over there and see exactly what this Georgia team brings to the table. And I think that Georgia can make a major statement on Saturday with how it plays that, hey, you may not know what to expect from Georgia before all this because it's been other teams the last few years that have been winning the national championships. But just know on the basis of what happens against the Hogs, you're going to have to reckon with us for the rest of the season. And I think there's a pretty specific statement Georgia can make there in that regard. Now, here's what I want to try to do for the next 60 seconds or so, maybe 2 minutes worth. I want to try to keep things really, really simple. And I want to try to make a very, very straightforward and simple point about Georgia, because you can get to a point in the week like this, going into the kind of game that Georgia's about to play on Saturday, where you've kind of chopped it up so many different ways that everything has been said and nobody can really remember anything that was said specifically by anybody. I want to avoid that here for a moment. I want to make a very, very simple point that if you go back and look, and this morning before the show began, I went back and looked at the last 10 instances with Georgia playing a team ranked in the top 15. If you go back and look at those games for Georgia, the last 10 times that it has taken place, I think what you see is a Georgia team that kind of leaves a little something to be desired. Not to say they haven't won some of these games, because they have. But the specific performance for Georgia in those games, the last 10, which actually kind of dates back to the end of the 2018 season, those last 10 games, I think you see statistically great opportunity for improvement, and that's the kind of improvement I'm looking forward to seeing from Georgia, hopefully on Saturday. Let me show you this on the screen for those of you watching on video. You are probably not surprised to hear that offensively, Georgia has kind of left something on the table against top 15 type teams over the course of its last 10 games. Georgia's only averaging 21.2 points scored per game over the course of that span. That is not a surprise. Clearly, Georgia has been working to create the kind of elite offense that other national championship teams and national championship contenders have had in recent years. And the fact that Georgia's only scoring slightly over 21 points per game against the best teams that it's played in recent years is not a surprise. However, what might be a little bit more of a surprise is, over the course of that same span, while Georgia against top 15 teams hasn't been scoring enough, did you know they've actually allowed more points than they've scored? That Georgia, on average, in its last 10 games against top 15 teams, is giving up 22.8 points per game. Now, that's a little bit of a surprise, right? Because we think of Georgia as being a great defensive team. And for the most part, it is. And against these elite teams that it's played, or maybe upper-tier teams that it's played in recent seasons, they've got plenty of games where they've completely dominated. Top 10 team Clemson, when the game was played anyway. Obviously, Georgia only held them to 3 points. Think back to, last year, believe it or not, Auburn, when it came to Athens, was ranked like 14th or something like that. Georgia held them to, 7 points, something like that. There have been plenty of moments when Georgia has played pretty good ranked teams and held them to a low number. But there's also the 37 allowed to LSU in the 2019 national championship, SEC championship game. There was also the 40-plus points allowed to Florida and Alabama last season. There are these moments in which, against good teams, Georgia actually hasn't stifled them defensively as much as we think they should. And so I say all of that to say that based on Georgia's recent performance in some big games, there is a big game thing to be proven on Saturday. And here's my simple wish for Georgia. And, you can think, well, Georgia's 18.5-point favorite. Ultimately, the point spread probably only matters if you're betting the game, right? I mean, it's just an expected outcome for the game. But if you don't have money on the game, whether Georgia wins by 17 or 19, that's probably not changing your life all that much one way or another, unless you actually have some of your cash down on the game. And for those of you that do, best of luck with that. But here's something we could all understand, whether we care about point spreads or not, whether we're betting the game or not. Here's the kind of thing we can all understand. I think a huge statement for Georgia tomorrow would be dogs in the 30s, hogs in the teens. That would tell you a lot about Georgia. Dogs in the 30s, hogs in the teens. That would be the kind of thing that Georgia hasn't been doing all that much in big games in recent seasons. They've only been averaging 21 points scored over the course of their last 10 against top 15 teams. If you score in the 30s tomorrow, that shows you how much this program has grown. Georgia's been giving up more points than it's been scoring in these games as of late, allowing an average of 22 points per contest, once again, over the course of the last 10. Keep Arkansas in the teens tomorrow. You're also showing the kind of defensive growth that some fans have been wanting to see in big games there as well. To me, it's as simple as that. If you want to see Georgia as a more legitimate championship contender in 2021 than it possibly has been in 2018, 2019, or 2020, that's the kind of statement you can make tomorrow. Dogs in the 30s, hogs in the teens. That would let you know this Georgia team may be on its way to being as good as you want it to be by the end of the season. All right, with that said, let me completely shift gears and talk about something totally different here for a moment. Obviously, the Dogs' opponent on Saturday is the Razorbacks. But in kind of an interesting way, Georgia may also be competing with Alabama a little bit tomorrow too. Hard not to notice that the two marquee games in the SEC, which will be taking place in back-to-back TV windows, Dogs at noon against Arkansas, Alabama at home against Ole Miss at 3:30 Eastern Time. And it's very interesting to hear the language coming out of both these programs in kind of making a similar challenge. It sounds like Alabama coach Nick Saban is a little worried about the kind of atmosphere that he thinks is going to be created at Bryant-Denny Stadium. I've seen some chatter from Greg Byrne, the athletic director, that they're trying to upgrade the music and trying to make the in-stadium atmosphere a little more enjoyable. Apparently, they feel like that's been lackluster at Alabama lately. Of course, pandemic from last year notwithstanding. This week, when Nick Saban had a chance to speak to the media and use the media to go through the media to his fans, it sounds like Saban's trying everything he can to make Bryant-Denny Stadium a home field advantage as the Rebels come in. Let me let you hear a little bit of this as kind of an interesting comparison with what's been going on there at Georgia. Here's Saban.
This is probably the first big game that we've had here for now like a year and a half because of last year's COVID. I know we've had a couple home games, but this is an SEC game at home for the first time in a couple years, and I hope our fans are excited about it as our team is. We're playing a really good team. They've got a lot of really good players. They do a great job in execution, and it's going to be a real challenge for us. And we played down at Florida. I mean, it was really, really tough on our team, and you could tell. So, hopefully we can make it a little bit that way for their team. And we're just excited to be playing in a big game at home in our stadium against a good team, and hopefully our fans, our players, and everybody will have great passion and enthusiasm, for this game.
I mean, you want to talk about not coming across as presidential. Nick Saban's like, boy, we need y'all to be as loud as those Florida fans were. I mean, that's not presidential right there. That is not what you want to hear from the GOAT, greatest of all time, Nick Saban, of, hey, I got to have these Crimson Tide fans creating the same atmosphere that existed for us in the swamp. Ooh, boy, I hope I don't ever have to hear Kirby Smart say something like that. That's a little bit of an interesting thing from Nick Saban, really challenging those Bama fans, Bama students, to create the atmosphere at Bryant-Denny Stadium. And, of course, Georgia's been doing the same thing. Maybe a slightly bigger challenge for Georgia because its start is at noon, much earlier against Arkansas. You've heard the push from Kirby Smart on this all week. We've been playing you that audio. I thought it was great yesterday on social media where the Georgia video crew got with a bunch of the Georgia players. And they've all been doing this acronym thing this week about being elite fans. And honestly, I'm not great at saying what all the letters in elite are supposed to stand for, but the players themselves were really good at doing this. I'll let you hear a little bit of this as Georgia, much like Alabama's pushing its fans against Ole Miss, Georgia continues to make that push for its fans against Arkansas for the early start on Saturday. Here are some Georgia players on that.
Early, loud, all red, intense, and electric. Let's go. Hey, man, we need y'all elite this week for the game, man. Yeah. We need y'all early, loud, intense, tough, and electric, man. Let's get out there and get it.
Hey, DawgNation, we need you there early, loud, intense, tough, electric. We need y'all to be elite on Saturday. Go, Dawg.
Short to the game. It's going down 12 o'clock Saturday. Dogs versus the Hogs. Let's get it.
So let's see if I have this correct. The first E stands for early. The second one stands for loud. The I is intense. The T stands for, what does the T stand for? Oh Lord. You can tell the Georgia players have their game face on better than I do. Let me see if I can hear that one more time so I can make sure I get these letters right. Can you play that clip again? Let's see if we can get all these letters right. Go ahead and do that again.
Early, loud, all red, intense, and electric. Let's go. Hey, man, we need y'all elite this week for the game, man. Yeah. We need y'all early, loud, intense, tough, and electric, man.
All right, that's it. You can stop it now. You can stop it now. So the T is for tough, and the final E is for electric. So this is what it is. Can we zoom in this for a second on this other camera? Can we do that? Early, loud, intense, tough, and electric. That's the challenge from the Georgia players. Kirby Smart's kind of done a similar thing there, pushing those Georgia players to be those Georgia fans to be early, loud, intense, tough, and electric. Now, if you need more motivation on this, you get this in the fact that Alabama's trying to push its fans to be loud against Ole Miss there as well. Which crowd will be louder? Is it Georgia with the slight disadvantage of having to do it at noon, or is it Alabama doing their thing there at 2:30 Central Time, 3:30 Eastern there at Bryant-Denny Stadium? Well, I get the impression the Georgia crowd's going to be ready to go. I get the impression that by 10:30 in the morning tomorrow, stadium is going to be, certainly from a student section standpoint, full. Georgia fans themselves going to be, look, this is going to be the craziest, like, you know how like the Ryder Cup, you got like the people around the first tee and they're already just getting after it like 6 in the morning sometimes. I think it's going to be very, very similar thing in Athens tomorrow. I have no concern about the crowd whatsoever. We've had some of our people saying it's going to be the greatest noon game crowd of all time. I sort of get the impression that's kind of the way we're heading on all of this. And if you need more motivation to get out there and truly get that done, go be a better crowd on national TV tomorrow than Alabama is going to be, even in a better TV window. I think that's a good level of motivation there, too, and it should be fun to see all of this plays out. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Kroger. We're going to do our part to be early, loud, intense, tough, and electric on today's show there as well. And, of course, glad to have all of you with us. Whether you got going at 9:45. See, early starts aren't a big deal for us because we get going pretty early around here, even before the regular show begins, 9:45 for our first and 15 at DawgNation.com and on the DawgNation app. Of course, all the other video channels as well, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Of course, radio, noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. A podcast wherever you find them, the Apple, Spotify, Google Player for the Android folks. A lot of you listen right there on SoundCloud, which is cool with me. Post the show each and every day at the world-famous DawgNation.com. However, you're getting to us. We just really appreciate you being here. Fun stuff all the way around. And a big thanks to our friends at Kroger, also making it all possible there as well. And Kroger's got some devilishly good things as you head towards Halloween. You can save 30% off right now on decor and on candy and all the trick-or-treating needs right there at Kroger for all of that. My kids love Kroger at Halloween because, like, at the store close to us, like, the whole, like, middle section of the store is basically turned into kind of like a Halloween section. My kids love that. It's a big tradition for us to, like, just go over there and, like, fill up 2 shopping carts with candy and everything else. So Kroger.com/Halloween for more on that. Kroger.com/Halloween for more on that. I legitimately am blown away by the list of elite visitors that's still, by the way, being added to. Blown away by the list of elite visitors who are expected to be on tap for Georgia against Arkansas tomorrow. Now, some of this is just based on luck. It just so happens that IMG Academy is not playing, so that works out well for guys like Bear Alexander, who recently transferred there, and Kamari Wilson and others. But some of this is just old-fashioned, like, you know, elbow grease. Like, Georgia has worked hard to get these guys to show up early and be a part of that. So we'll do all of this with Jeff Sintel here coming up in just a moment. On the road with him, assisted by AAA. Big update on the recruiting landscape. Jeff was also on the road last week speaking to a big-time 5-star name. We'll get some stuff on Jeff about Luther Burden here coming up in just a moment, too. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse. And it's presented today by Marco's Pizza, delivered by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And this is kind of off the beaten path a little bit, but I do think it's somewhat relevant because of how much it's been talked about. There is a lot of chatter about Clemson right now. And the thing that I'm getting from the Georgia fans who are either reaching out to me on social media or those who are commenting in our comment sections each day at DawgNation.com, the sense that I'm getting is that Georgia fans don't quite know how to feel about all of this. Like, on the one hand, normally Georgia fans would love the idea that Clemson's being trashed by the media, because I think there are some Georgia fans who feel like that over the years Clemson may have been unfairly praised just on the basis of the fact they were beaten up on a pillow soft ACC to obtain the status that they've kind of established for themselves around college football. But in this particular year, you've got Georgia with what at the time was thought to be a marquee win versus the Tigers that now seems somewhat devalued in the eyes of the media, and I think that there are some Georgia fans who are a little bit confused about that. Let me give you an example. This is from the show Get Up on ESPN. They bring Paul Feinbaum in. Producers tell him what to say, and he goes out there and reads the script about, whatever, they want to say, including ripping Clemson pretty hard on one of this week's shows because it's lost to NC State. It was kind of ugly against Georgia Tech. Clearly couldn't move the football at all against Georgia. And Feinbaum went hard on Clemson on one of the shows this week, which certainly got the attention of some Georgia fans. This is Feinbaum.
Dabo's dynasty is done. I do not like anything I see there. They've lost one coach a couple of years ago to USF. I think that was a big loss. This is a staff that has always been together, but I think it's getting stale. Yes, recruiting is still good, but will it be elite after what we just got through watching Greeny? It just doesn't look like Clemson is part of the cool kids anymore, and I think that they're going to pay for it in recruiting, and they play in a terrible league, which will hurt them even more.
So Paul Feinbaum says the Clemson dynasty is done. They're no longer elite. They are no longer, as he said, sitting at the cool kids table anymore on all this. And there's I think a knee-jerk reaction from some Georgia fans of, okay, now they trash Clemson now that Georgia's beaten them. But here's what I'm here to tell you. If you're a Georgia fan, you want to be loving all of this. You really should. And you shouldn't be worried for 1 second how it potentially devalues the win you've already gotten. I think it's a mistake for Georgia fans to be looking in the rearview mirror on this. In other words, who you've played isn't as important as how you're playing right now. And Georgia's status as a championship contender is going to be proven in games going forward, including the one against Arkansas on Saturday. But there is also a need to kind of keep your eye on big picture stuff in college football there as well. And you heard Feinbaum say this at the end of that clip, that what Clemson's currently experiencing is going to hurt them in recruiting. And recruiting is a zero-sum game. Bad news for one of my regional rivals is good news for me, at least potentially. And Georgia, I believe, could be in a very, very strong position to take full advantage of the fact that Clemson has at least slipped some from its perch and maybe fallen off completely. Let me give you another example of this here real quick. Let's think about the name Arch Manning for a moment. Elite quarterback from the class of 2023, famous last name. Jeff wrote about him this week at DawgNation.com. Arch was at Georgia a couple of weeks ago for the game, and clearly Georgia is one of the teams in the recruiting battle for Manning right now. Arch came up this week on SEC Country Live. I brought on Richard Cross, who's kind of an insider to the Ole Miss program. Ole Miss is one of the teams that's also in the recruitment for Manning as well. But in talking to Richard about Arch Manning, listen to what Richard says about Clemson, possibly being influenced by some of the same stuff that caused Feinbaum a moment ago to say what he said. If you're a Georgia fan, the demise of Clemson, if it truly is happening, I promise you, this is nothing but good news for you, even if it seems to somewhat devalue the win you got in week one. Let me give you an example from an Ole Miss insider on SEC Country Live this week.
I honestly think that you've only got 4 programs that are legitimately in it. I think it's Alabama and Texas and Georgia and Ole Miss. I know there are people that want to say, yeah, but his mom went to Virginia. Come on, Arch Manning's not going to Virginia. Clemson, I don't know. It all of a sudden feels like there's kind of a weird vibe with Clemson. And why are you going to go to the ACC? I mean, there's one thing that those 4 programs have in common. They either are SEC teams or are going to be SEC teams. The Mannings strike me very much as an SEC family.
So keep this in mind. Guy living in Oxford, Mississippi, who has no dog in this fight, other than, obviously the Ole Miss part of this, but looking at Clemson saying, boy, that's a weird vibe right now. Something's kind of strange over there. You no longer have the kind of elite characteristics that Clemson once thought it had. So I got to tell you, as someone who wants the best for Georgia and wants the worst for those that stand in Georgia's way, I don't mind seeing Clemson getting trashed right now. And I don't really care what it leads some people to believe about the win that Georgia got week one. Georgia got the win. It put it in its back pocket, and now it's moving on. The only things I'm concerned about right now are the wins Georgia's about to get. And when some of that kind of stuff is going to happen on the recruiting trail, the potential erosion of the Clemson program makes some of those recruiting victories a little easier maybe after all of this. That is Around the Doghouse. It's delivered today by our friends at Marco's Pizza. And, of course, one of the things about Marco's Pizza that I love is the great care they take to make every pizza taste great. And it looks great, too. When I'm watching this video, it's always around this time each and every time we talk about the show where I'm getting pretty hungry for lunch and things like that. And you see that golden brown crust, baked so perfectly each and every time with that great 3 cheeses melted on top, those old world toppings. I'm the kind of guy, I like the pepperoni, I like the sausage, I like as many of those kind of toppings as I can get. Not as many of the green toppings, to be completely frank, but the meaty toppings, I'll take all those you want to give me on all that. And Marco's Pizza's got plenty of that for you there. And, of course, they've also offering great savings there as well. The mouth-watering pizza, mouth-watering savings, it's all a perfect blend, including the bundle right now of a large one-topping pizza, the pizza bowl, which is like the pizza flavor without the crust, and the cheesy bread. It's all just $21.99. That's $21.99. $14.99. That'll get you great savings at Marco's Pizza. Of course, participation may vary, so check the store closest to you for more details on that. You can find it at Marcos.com, the Marcos app. Marco's Pizza. Pizza lovers get it. Marcos will also be with us for our Dog Nation post-game show on Saturday. They always bring the Marco's Pizza moment of the game there, and we'll give them a chance to honor another Georgia performer on Saturday, what we hope is a big win for the Dogs against the Hogs. So we'll look forward to seeing Marco's Pizza for our Dog Nation post-game show tomorrow. And as all of you are enjoying some football here this weekend, don't forget to make Marco's Pizza a big part of that. All right, before we're done, I've got some of the best golden shoes that we've had. This week has been just overwhelming by the quality of the golden shoe submissions. So we'll share some of those and have some fun on the way out the door. I told you there's also controversy. Some of it somewhat substantial, some of it just a little bit silly, but still involves a lot of Georgia rivals who are playing big games here this weekend in the SEC. We'll touch all those bases before we're done. But the thing I know you want to know about, what's the current state of the elite list of visitors expected to be a part of the elite crowd, the, early, loud, intense, tough, and electric? The fans who are there to do that are doing it in part so the recruits can be impressed. Exactly who are all those recruits? Let's find out now as we go on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel right now.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to Jeff Sintel on the road, assisted by AAA. Jeff, I know you wrote about this week. I think the list has probably been updated some since then, especially Elite 2023 names I'm hearing kind of added to all of this, and I'm sure you'll tell us about that. But I think it's really pretty remarkable just how substantial this list is with big names, given the challenge of high school football on a Friday night, at least for a lot of these players, not all of them, but a lot of them. High school football on a Friday night, early wake-up call to be over in Athens, and yet it's still looking like it's going to be really just a who's who, an all-star team's worth of prospects sitting over there in that West End zone. I think Georgia deserves a lot of credit if they truly pull this off to the magnitude it seems like they're going to make the dreadful noon start into a big-time atmosphere and a real epicenter for elite recruiting activity. Boy, fun to think about how that's about to unfold.
Hey, Brandon, good morning, man. It's funny, the words you're using, epicenter and storm, it's got me thinking that I want everybody out there to picture this. Picture me right now as your favorite meteorologist. And I got to say that there's a storm coming from Fayetteville, and there's also a front coming from IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida. And it just feels like all this stuff is coming together for Kirby Smart. One, Sam Pittman had a great ball team. He's coming in. That would be a top 10 team, which would attract ESPN game day, college game day. The national attention will be on this game, even if it's at noon for a kickoff. I think that's very important because this is going to be the signature recruiting event of the Georgia home season when you have big crowd, big spotlight, big opponent, all that stuff. Now, combine that with this pressure coming from IMG. Brendan, it's really fortuitous. IMG, which probably has maybe, again, another 3 or 4 potential Bulldogs on that team in multiple classes, and they have an off week this week, Brandon. And I don't know whether Kirby Smart is living right or it's Coach Cooper, the new recruiting coordinator, director of recruiting, that's living right. But somehow all of these things are coming together where, man, the noon start doesn't matter. Georgia is, again, a destination. And it's almost to the point, Brandon, where these are rich program problems. But I'm wondering now that there's so many recruits in town for this game that I'm wondering how can they give them all the attention that maybe they so richly deserve to kind of either close or flip or really get back into things with a lot of these guys. It's a lot of guys, and it's a lot of guys that deserve like that A1A premium attention from the Bulldogs. And maybe the best thing about the noon kick is that they're going to have about 4 or 5 hours with every kid after the game to really relax and get to know them and chill after the ball game's over on Saturday night.
Yeah, I said this before our show began to a portion of our video audience that, there's so many like all-access style documentaries now, documentary style shows, whether it be the SEC Network, HBO, places like that, that one of them I'd love to see is, if they ever would allow it, is how the recruiting apparatus works in a weekend like this, because it takes a lot of organizational structure to get this many guys to show up. But as you said, like one of the things I think we hear from time to time kind of, behind the scenes is it is a logistical nightmare to make everybody feel loved when they do come in. Now, Georgia, to its credit, pulls it off really well. I don't know that all programs do. But when it comes to face-to-face attention, the definition of that means that you're only giving it to one person at one time, which means that, on a day like this, there are 30 guys you're not giving face-to-face love to at one particular time. And, Kirby is very comfortable in an environment like that because he's, obviously so energetic that he's just engine's going to run until he takes care of everybody. But there are a lot of coaches who I don't think are quite as comfortable in this kind of scenario where you got to get them there, but then you got to make them feel loved while they are there. I'd love to be a fly on the wall or just see a documentary one day about the apparatus for kind of how all of this gets done, because I think if fans could see it, I think they'd be just blown away by the precision of it all.
Really, Brandon, he lives for it. I think it'd be hard to all access document all of that because you know how it is. You can't publicize recruiting visits. Maybe they can let the tape come out after the young men have signed with Georgia. But aside from him calling on the McGill Society to try to figure out a way to get a retractable roof so those red lights and darkness could happen inside Sanford Stadium, I think he's got just about everything he would want for this game. Let me share a little bit of insight because I don't know if everybody out there knows how this works or we've ever really talked about it on your program before. But so here's a good example. So the South Carolina game, I don't know if folks know this, but there's assigned seating now for the West End Zone. It wasn't by some circumstance that Anai White out of Philadelphia was in the front row, and then if Georgia scored a touchdown, there could be some spontaneous interaction with that end zone. It wasn't just by some stroke of genius that Arch Manning and his family were there in that front row as well. The row behind them was Reuben Owens, the five-star running back out of Texas. Malachi Starks, Georgia's five-star commitment, was in that second row of the other side. And then you look on the other side of the West End Zone portal, and you see Bo Hughley on that side, who would commit to Georgia in a couple of weeks, maybe a matter of days. Like, a lot of that stuff is really assigned seating. I even go back to how hard of a ticket that is. I go back to the Notre Dame game, Brandon, in 2019, and it's in my mind's eye where I remember that, Gunnar Stockton, everyone knows how big of a recruit he was in 2019 for everybody. And Gunnar Stockton was like in the way upper bleachers. Like he wasn't even in the section that was eye level with the tunnel where the smoke comes out. Meanwhile, side road, Georgia has upgraded that by about 1,000% the type of smoke when they come out of that tunnel now. But I think Gunnar was up in maybe the very high road bleachers. I mean, that's where a 2022 recruit in the 2019 season, that was kind of the pecking order, and now Gunnar's a guy that's much closer down in the front rows. But, man, what they're going to do with all these guys, probably one of the most interesting things for me is you wonder how prioritized guys are. You can just look at the seating chart and see how close they are to the field.
No, that's really interesting. All right, you're talking about giving an entirely new hierarchy to all of this. That's actually really interesting to consider there. Okay, we can't spend any long amount of time on any one name. Guys like Kamari Wilson and Barry Alexander, I think we've talked about a lot before. So let me focus on a couple of guys we maybe talked about a little bit less. When I think about a guy like Shamar Stewart, who's expected to be there, who's also been closely connected to Miami. Jeff, Miami's a disaster. I mean, a disaster of the highest order. Is Georgia's chances with a guy like Stewart now better because of the Florida native looking at that Miami program and just not seeing much? At least that's my presumption. You wouldn't see much when you look at a place like that. Is it as simple as that when it comes to a guy like Stewart?
I think there's a telltale sign there for Tyreek Stevenson, Brandon. Tyreek made his own decision. He wanted to come back home and be close to mom and family and maybe rep the U and kind of restore that brand. But I'm sure some folks, it's not lost on some folks that Tyreek Stevenson is playing on that Miami defense last night when he could be playing on this Georgia defense this weekend. Sometimes that other side of that grass is not always greener on the other side of the road, but, these young men have the ability to make those adult, responsible ownership decisions on their own, and then they have to kind of, endure or live through or just ride with the consequences. you look at a lot of these guys. Shamar, I think he's going to make a couple more visits to Georgia and other schools regardless. A couple of names that intrigue me is, Brandon, there's the strong possibility, and I know how you love for us to talk about receivers. Andre Green Jr. might very well be in the house on Saturday.
Ooh, boy.
Coming out of Virginia, you want to talk about maybe a little bit of a chink in the armor. Well, Clemson is not as bulletproof as it used to be and indestructible as it used to be.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia there. I mean, Brandon, the thought of Andre Green Jr. and Luther Burden in the class at receiver, I mean, that would be really everything besides a couple of high-profile offensive linemen. That would kind of be a dream class amid the dream class. And I think Georgia has always been there, first, second, third, toss them all up and, throw them all up in the air. I think they've always been there with Andre Green Jr. The expectation is Jaheim Singletary will also be there, the five-star cornerback out of Jacksonville. Brandon, I don't know how all these recruits can get there by 11. I don't want to hear anybody in DawgNation on any of our social streaming programs complaining about the kick time. If all these recruits who had football games on Friday nights can somehow get to Athens that quickly. Janelle Aguero, this is a guy that's a 2023 safety out of IMG Academy. He has a 4.38 laser time. He is excelling at IMG Academy now. Came out of Massachusetts, much like Lewis Seen. He goes back and forth and vibes a little bit with Lewis Seen. Lewis Seen talked to him on his recruiting trip, and I thought it was very eye-catching how Lewis Seen tweeted out this summer, actually on a DawgNation story about Aguero, that he said that Janelle Aguero will be better than him in college. Quite a stark statement right there from a young man that might be working his way into a second-round draft slot at least for the Georgia Bulldogs in this season. And the names, man, they just keep coming and coming, and we got to have the obligatory Bear Alexander thing because, Brandon, he's still uncommitted.
Yep.
He's no longer in the state of Texas. He can't go visit College Station every other weekend. Texas A&M, the bloom is a little bit off the 12th man rose there as well. Georgia just keeps to seem to be adding and absorbing more strength as the season goes along. And lest we forget, he was committed for some time. He really still loves Georgia and the program and the people there. This will be his first time in Sanford Stadium for a ball game. And I think everybody's going to know who Big Bear Alexander is. So that's another very huge visit for Georgia in the class of 2022.
I want to do two other names here very, very quickly because you also kind of touched on this with a theme a moment ago. If we're taking advantage, or if you're looking at Georgia taking advantage of, possible erosion with Clemson, another name that you had on your graphic a moment ago that we showed on the screen here is the 2023 five-star Victor Burley. And Jeff, Burley and Georgia, as you've, kind of touched on, they haven't always seemed all that deeply connected. Burley seems to have a lot of affection from Clemson, just kind of following the stuff on social media and things like that. He's the kind of guy that Georgia is going after as of late. One of those five stars who's also a team captain type. That's what I think of Jalen Walker as being. That's what I think of Malachi Starks as being. Having spent some time around the Warner Robins program last week, I can tell you that they will attest to not just Burley's, playing skills, but this as well. They attest to his character there too. This is a big time 2023 name, and when I see him added to the list to go along with all the other 2022s, of course, LT Overton and other big names in 2023 there as well. But when I think about a guy like Burley, who Georgia's trying to get back in on or get in deeper with, I mean, to me, this game creates a great opportunity for a guy like that there as well.
Yeah, Middle Georgia's finest. I love that story we shared on the Peachtree TV broadcast last week about maybe one of the coolest stops he's ever made is Burley was one of his coaches saw him on the security cameras, and the national anthem was playing in the hallway. Burley stops, and then there's a young man that's kind of, progressing down the hallway right by him, and Burley sticks out that big paw and kind of stops him in his tracks, and he's like, all right, fella, you and I are going to pay respect to our country right here with this national anthem, and we're going to wait in the hallway and give respect to the United States of America. Lots of stories like that about Victor Burley. He was part of the homecoming court last weekend for that big Lee County game, made a couple of pressures in the game, got involved on the quarterback, harassed the pocket for a very good Lee County team with a lot of really good size up front. And, man, I mean, Brandon, it's almost to the point, and I hope folks will not think I'm sitting here and trying to entertain the choir, but you look at 2023 defensive ends, man, and there are guys like Kelby Collins. There's a guy like L.T. Overton that I think will eventually be a 3-5 technique, but, Kelby Collins and, Victor Burley. There's a lot of names, man. There's a guy coming in from Tallahassee this weekend that I'm going to be interested in seeing, Raylen Wilson, a linebacker that's about 230 pounds, that is running right around 11.5 or 11.15 in the 100 meters. It's a point, Brandon, where it's almost Georgia has a chance to select a lot of these guys rather than hope that they put in a good push and the pitch works and everything germinates. I mean, and Brandon, I can't let this segment in without mentioning Kamari Wilson.
Sure.
Georgia could lose up to 4 safeties off this team. When you think Chris Smith, you think Lewis Seen, you think Tyke Smith, you think Latravius Brini, and that certainly creates a need. I know David Daniels there, Javon Bullards look great. I know that Kamari Lassiter's look great. Some of those guys that could be interchangeable like a Brini or interchangeable like a Chris Smith, but Kamari Wilson is a different dude. He is a guy, number 1 safety in the country, IMG Academy, top 20 prospect. Georgia's been after him for quite some time. You've also got a Florida Gator who has a 10.55 commitment coming in. I mean, it's almost like too much. It's like, when you're at Thanksgiving with your grandma and she breaks out the pecan pie that she wasn't supposed to bring out, or the lemon bar cookies, or red velvet cake, you're just like, this is just way, 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 way too much. The storylines here, the guys in town, again, for a noon game, there's been a bigger game, Brandon. I'm going to be real. I can remember 2018 Auburn, 2019 Notre Dame. There's been more 5-stars, more top 125 guys in town. But for noon, for an Arkansas game, this is pretty sporty this weekend.
Last recruit I want to mention, I got a couple of things I want to ask you about in addition to this, but the last recruit that's I think expected to visit this weekend that I want to ask you about, because I think he's kind of a bellwether recruit as he goes. I think it tells you how other names kind of go for this 2022 class. You reported earlier this week that Mikael Williams is expected to be on hand coming up from Columbus for that one. To me, this is a real good indicator that what looked like lack of momentum for recruiting for Georgia in the summertime was a little bit of a false negative there on that. Williams, who is at least officially for the moment a USC commit, his presence, the friends that he has that are also elite 2022 recruits, I mean, it just kind of suggests that there could be a lot moving behind the scenes as Mikael Williams goes.
Yeah, Brandon, I think when we write the 2022 recruiting story that we write the day after, the week after, where we try to tell a lot of the things that maybe were the better time to discuss those was in February rather than, July, October, November. I think 2 words are going to be prevalent in that storyline and that narrative is erosion. I think that was a good word you used earlier. You got your inner geologist cranking away right there. And amplification, the erosion of USC in Mikael Williams' case, the amplification of Georgia in another case. Brendan, it's been no secret that Mikael Williams, Tyree West, Christian Miller, those guys really always wanted to play together. There was varying degrees of evaluation. There was varying degrees of love, Georgia, across all 3 of those guys. And sometimes they just wanted to see those guys in camp. They wanted to see them work. I thought it was interesting. We told a story on DawgNation.com about what happens when Georgia doesn't get a recruit. And Mikael Williams had a really good window into that, where Georgia heard about it and they were like trying to get him to hold off, trying to get him to wait. They were kind of, Mikael Williams told me that some of those hardworking ladies in the recruiting office were almost to tears because he was choosing someone else. Well, as we all know, what happens 2.5 months ago in recruiting usually feels like 2.5 years ago in recruiting. And Mikael Williams will be in Athens on Saturday for a potentially very impactful visit. Christian Miller won't be there. He'll be at homecoming. The recent Cedar Grove 2023 commitment, Kyan Lee, will be there. Such a great pickup for Georgia over the last week. I hope folks, digested that as this is a guy that could start for multiple years at Georgia once he gets things rolling, and that's saying quite a lot with all the dogs on that defense.
Yeah, we'll get more into him coming up in a moment here. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it really is. I mean, I use the word constellation a lot, but, man, this is like an astronomer's delight. There's going to be so many stars in town for the noon kickoff. We can say this, Brandon. This is the best recruiting visit weekend for a noon kickoff in Georgia football history.
All right, there's a few more names I want to mention with you, including the recent Georgia commit. As I said before, let me first, though, remind folks it's on the road, assisted by AAA with Jeff Sintel here today. And, of course, AAA, we think about them when it comes to roadside assistance. I'm traveling a lot on the weekends. I'm happy to have AAA in my back pocket everywhere that I go. But also AAA can be a tremendous resource as well for you when it comes to life insurance. And, listen, that's also something I take very seriously. I've got a spouse. I've got a wife. I've got kids. It's my responsibility with my income to help take care of all of them. And, you know, while it's not always a pleasant thing to think about, I do spend some time thinking about what would happen if I was gone? What would happen if my income went away? How would I, make sure that my family was taken care of if I wasn't around anymore to be able to do that? It's one of the things that makes it's just kind of a man's responsibility, right? It's a person's responsibility when it comes to life insurance and all of that, and that's what AAA can do for you. They've got very friendly financial services associates that can explain all your options and help you make the best decision that you possibly can. So a lot of different ways for you to reach out and get in touch. You can give them a call, 866-695-0222. That's 866-695-0222. You can just stop by a AAA office and talk to them today, or you can go online. It's aaa.com/life, AAA.com/life for more information on that. All right, Jeff, a couple of things here. You mentioned Lee a moment ago. Cedar Grove is deep a program as there exists in the Atlanta area right now, certainly, at least when it comes to the top-end talent. Also, one of those bedrock-type guys that you're going to need for 2023 class. Lockdown defensive back the way that he has a chance to be. Tell us a little bit more here about what Georgia is getting in Kyan Lee.
Yeah, I think this is a guy that he makes the most important things important. He's centered on faith. He's centered on family. He's centered on football. Very physical. Brandon, he was on a team last year at Cedar Grove where I counted them up. They were 9 kind of Power 5 potential players on that defense. And he was 155 pounds, soaked in Gatorade, and he was the region defensive player of the year. Christian Miller, All-American defensive tackle in his own right, 1 year older than Kyan Lee. And he basically said that kid was the best player on the defense. They call him Big Play K. The 2023 recruits, the commitments already really love him. Very quietly, Georgia's already putting together a dog of a secondary for the 2023 cycle. Everybody needs DBs. And Brandon, I got to have a quick pause for the cause. Somewhere in Gainesville, there's some Gator tears right now because Julian Humphrey, he calls himself Julio Humphrey out of Clear Lake High School in Houston, Texas, really just tweeted out that he's in town right now. He's in Athens right now on his official visit, already there for a weekend. And, man, he's going to get there early. He's going to get to see a whole lot of good stuff over the next 48 hours in Athens. And that's a Florida commitment, Brandon. 10.55 speed, top 125 overall recruit.
Yep.
He was feeling kind of high and mighty about the Gators after that Alabama performance. And it'd be very interesting to see what 48 hours in Athens means to his recruiting process once this weekend is over.
All right, it's turning into a marathon here, so let's do these last two pretty quick. And, we'll obviously, keep these conversations ongoing for the next few weeks. You had a big update this week on Christian Miller. That's a guy that's friends with Mikael Williams, we talked about a little earlier. Another one of these guys that seems to be kind of trending back towards Georgia at the right time. Give me a brief thumbnail on where things stand with Miller here at the moment. By the way, a high school teammate of Lee's.
Yeah. It's funny that social media gestures going around right now is Georgia's going to try and do the Cedar Grove sweep with C.J. Madden, who just picked up his 4th star from 24/7 Sports this week, Kyan Lee, and then you've got Christian Miller. Now, Miller's had a little bit of evolution with his decision. He's not going to early enrollee. He's not going to sign during the early period, but he is going to commit at the All-American Bowl in San Antonio on January the 7th. And Georgia's really made a strong move with him. Amplification of Christian Miller. That buzzword would describe what's going on with his recruitment. He had a great visit in July. He had a great experience as a spectator only for the Clemson game. And then it really just floored him, Brandon. I think his description of what it means to see the red lights in person in Athens live was probably one of the most candid and one of the most clever ways I've ever heard a recruit describe it. I think Georgia and Ohio State, that's simply going to be the decision here. He's going to keep an official visit to Georgia in his back pocket. And I think Georgia has really made a move there with Christian Miller, who I think has to be one of the bell cow commitments for the Bulldogs in this class for Georgia to have the best possible group of future Bulldogs in the 2022 cycle.
And then finally there's this. Last weekend you spent some time over in East St. Louis with Luther Burden, the 5-star wide receiver. That's obviously a huge name to know. He's actually getting close to a decision here coming up there as well. How did you find Mr. Burden last week, and where do you think the Dogs stand in that recruitment?
Yeah, so many great stories I got to get up on the site about Luther Burden III. There's really one good one involving Ernest Green III, when those two guys met up when St. John Bosco played East St. Louis. Brennan, in a couple of weeks, you want to talk about an epicenter for Georgia recruiting on a Friday. Luther Burden and his East St. Louis Flyers. Brennan, you're going to have to bear with all those highlights of East St. Louis because with the logo, there's a lot of orange and blue.
Huh.
There's a big F that's on their helmet sometimes. You're just going to have to deal with it. But very strong contender Georgia is now. It's really between Georgia and Missouri. He's going to visit Missouri for North Texas next week, and then he's going to come in for an official visit to Georgia on October the 16th, centered around the Kentucky weekend. It will be the last official visit for LB3, Luther Burden III, before he makes his decision on October 19th.
Jeff, tremendous stuff. We'll look forward to reading a lot more from you about Burden at DawgNation.com. We appreciate being here on the road, assisted by AAA. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and we'll look forward to getting a chance to speak to you soon.
Hey, Brandon, we'll see you at Eagles Landing tonight, buddy.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Let's not forget about that. Big game tonight between Elka and Trinity Christian there as well. Thank you for the reminder on that, Jeff.
Yes, sir, man.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
All right, tremendous there with Jeff Sintel. Good stuff all the way around. We can bring the music down just a little bit for right now. Let me also remind you, as you're getting ready for the weekend, looking to make it as fun as you possibly can, how about my friends at Classic City Lager for all of that? You know, it's just good cold beer, right? You're getting ready for an early tailgate on Saturday. Classic City Lager pairs very well with your eggs, your bacon, your sausage, whatever you're doing, your breakfast sandwich, however you got that all going on. Classic City Lager goes great with that. It's a taste of Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. You can get some, take it with you to Athens, of course, for your tailgate, but pretty much any way you want to enjoy this. It's just good cold beer. 6-packs, 12-pack cans, whatever you're doing your shopping, you can find some. It's a lager-style beer, lighter in color, but no sacrifice in flavor. It's a craft-style lager. That means the great folks at Creature Comforts Brewing Company that work so hard to make some of your favorite craft beers already. Classic City Lager, kind of the next in line and all of that. I love it. Anybody that I know that's tried it, they love it there too. A lot of you are already kind of familiar with it anyway. Get some for your tailgate this weekend. Get some for whatever you're doing on the weekend, watching pro football on Sunday or just anything else the rest of the weekend. Back patio, front porch, whatever else. Classic City Lager is perfect for this time of year. So find some wherever you're doing your shopping today. It is good, cold beer. All right, for SEC Through today, we're going to do something we don't always do. I want to play some audio here for a little bit. So let's go ahead and bring the music down on that so we can let you hear some of this. I told you before, there was controversy around a couple of spots in the SEC. One of these may be more serious. One of these a little sillier. Let's start with the silly one at first because it puts Dan Mullen in kind of an uncomfortable spotlight, and I am always a fan of that. So Mullen this week was asked about one of the top players in the Kentucky roster, Wan'Dale Robinson. And Mullen kind of got frozen in his tracks for a moment because he didn't recognize Robinson's name. Now, Mullen had a reason for not recognizing his name. Judge for yourself how all of this goes when it comes to Mullen, the reporter, and the Kentucky player Wan'Dale Robinson. Here is Dan Mullen. Take a listen to this.
And then Wan'Dale Robinson specifically, what is he doing for them?
Which one? What number?
Oh, God. You got me on the spot.
I know numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. He's number one.
I gotcha. Yeah. I think doing it, yeah.
So in this particular case, so Mullen's like, I don't know names. I just know numbers. And in a roundabout way, I sort of, I guess, understand where Mullen's coming from this. Listen, I mean, I have a hard time with names as it is. Trust me, getting ready for high school games on Friday, I'm just studying names over and over again. All the guys in the SEC we got to try to keep up with. And frankly, I'm not always great at remembering all the names either. But here's the point with Mullen. You got to play it off better than this. You can't get so deer in headlights when the guy asks you about a name. Just kind of say something that, sounds good and then pivot and talk about whatever you want to. That's how you got to handle that in the moment. You can't be like, who is that again now? I never heard of that guy. You can't be doing that kind of stuff. I think it's also unfair to ask reporters on top of everything else now have to memorize every number of every player in the SEC. If that's the new standard for press conference questions, Coach, can you talk about number 23 on the defense for, I just think asking reporters to remember numbers is a little bit tricky here. You're not asking the coach to remember all the names, just one or two names of the very best players. To me, this just sort of goes to show you the lack of street smarts that Mullen has, the fact that he kind of gets tripped up by the reporter on this. Just pretend like you know who it is, say something complimentary, and then move on. That's what a normal person would do in that. But Mullen finds a way seemingly to make everything awkward, and maybe other SEC coaches doing what they can to stir the pot on this a bit. Shane Beamer was appearing at the SEC teleconference this week. South Carolina plays Troy on Saturday. By the way, South Carolina only about a 7-point favorite over a Troy team that lost to Louisiana Monroe last week, one of the worst teams in the country. So be very careful with a very odd-looking spread there. But the point is, Beamer was asked about one of the Troy players. I'll show you the quote here on the screen because I didn't get a chance to record this. He says, and Football Scoop had this, he says, I don't want to create a Dan Mullen situation here, a firestorm, when speaking about the Troy player, going on to say, I also know numbers, I don't know names. So I'm sure if you're Dan Mullen, you're like, Shane Beamer, can you keep my name out of your mouth here for a moment? Why are you trying to stir this up and make this even worse? All of a sudden now it's being defined as a Dan Mullen situation and a firestorm. Good for Beamer on that. Beamer's turned out to be a pretty good little personality here. His description of the Georgia defense was very funny the other day, and stirring the pot here with Mullen, we like that around here. So all of that is pretty good. So that's kind of a silly controversy involving an SEC coach here this week. Let me give you a little bit more serious one. I told you to begin the week that good coaches don't fire assistants in the middle of the season. That kind of comes across as kind of cheap scapegoating. It makes you seem out of control. And if that's true for any coach, it's especially true for coaches who just got the job. Coaches who are brand new to the SEC with legitimate questions about how they can handle the pressure cooker of down here in this part of the country, in this conference, when you've been mostly in kind of the sleepy Big Sky area of the country at a place like Boise State, where they just don't do it at the same way they do it down here. A lot of folks have wondered how Brian Harsin was going to handle that. And I think it makes Harsin seem beneath the standard of the job when he's firing his wide receivers coach, Cornelius Williams, after a kind of as a knee-jerk reaction to a game closer than it should have been against Georgia State there on Saturday. And he got unmercifully criticized by former Auburn offensive coordinator Tony Franklin, who sort of weirdly has a podcast. Like everybody has a podcast now, including a former Auburn offensive coordinator. And, Franklin in the podcast that this clip is I'm about to play for you is taken from, he totally acknowledges that he's got an ulterior motive here. He knows Cornelius Williams well. They have a personal relationship. They've worked together in a football sense before. And maybe he's also bitter about himself having been fired from Auburn. But this is the kind of thing, Franklin, the kind of person that has some credentials, this is the kind of thing that's going to get traction there on the Plains. When a former Auburn offensive coordinator is ripping the current Auburn head coach down in Alabama, people are going to notice. So fresh off this for Auburn before they go to LSU this week, this is the former Auburn offensive coordinator Tony Franklin going in on Brian Harsin. Listen to this.
So 4 games in, you crack and you fire your receiver coach? I do know a little bit about football. Maybe not a lot, but I know a little bit. I have been around, and I've done some stuff. And here's what I'll tell you that I see. The best coached group on the field for offense was your receivers. They were the best coached group. So you're basically firing your receiver coach because your offensive line sucks.
I mean, that's not Johnny Fan on message board. That's the former Auburn offensive coordinator who, listen, he's got all kinds of motivations for saying what he's saying, but he also went on for about 25 minutes in this podcast. It was really pretty intense, and I won't pretend to know if Cornelius Williams had the wide receivers coached up better than any other position group on the field. I won't pretend to know that, but I do know this. Auburn was thought to be incredibly thin at the receiver position before the year began, so to the extent that group is struggling right now, that's not going to be Williams' fault. And when you look at the overall issue, that the Auburn program is dealing with, and this is something that Franklin also brought up. I didn't play this audio because, frankly, it was just far too colorful to make much sense out of if I, bleeped it all out. But essentially the idea that Harsin is spineless because he's throwing Williams, the former wide receivers coach, under the bus to appease boosters, message board posters, and everything else. It is getting very intense around Brian Harsin. Harsin needs a win bad at LSU on Saturday, and that is not an easy place to get a win that you have to have. LSU and Auburn is going to be really, really juicy. I'd say Tennessee, Missouri, not quite as good a game as that, but still pretty interesting. And for a Tennessee staff and Tennessee, institution, the athletic department, one of the things they're working to do is make people forget about the fact that, hey, the coach they could have had is Greg Schiano. Now, listen, I don't make much of a big deal about Schiano and the little bit of success he's had at Rutgers. They did lose last week to Michigan, but had won games prior to that. But, man, it certainly seems like the coaching search and the thing that led to Jeremy Pruitt being hired and the way in which Tennessee fans and influential boosters involved themselves to prevent Schiano from being hired, it's the kind of thing the media just doesn't seem to want to let go here, including Kirk Herbstreit this week speaking on the ESPN podcast, not even about Tennessee, talking about Michigan, but then it bled over into a Rutgers talk, which bled over into a little bit of a quick jab against the Vols. This is Kirk Herbstreit from the ESPN podcast.
Everyone's excited about Michigan. They're 4-0. They beat Rutgers. By the way, Rutgers is better than when you hear Rutgers, they're better than that. Schiano, another coach, is doing really good work. And to think Tennessee kicked him out of the door before they could have had him is crazy.
I mean, Greg Schiano must be the greatest source for every media person in the entire universe because the media just loves Schiano. And the idea that the success he's had at Rutgers, you have to look it up to even know what it is, the idea that level of success makes Tennessee crazy because they didn't want him, I think that itself is pretty crazy. And y'all know I'm no Vols fan here, but I've always felt like this idea that, there's a certain elitist category of media type who think that fans should just sort of sit there and take whatever their program does and accept whatever coach their, athletic director wants to hire, and that's just all that it's going to be. And they shouldn't ask any questions beyond that. I've always felt like that was a little bit gross. I actually like Herbstreit, at least for the most part, but I don't like that idea that you're crazy because you didn't want Greg Schiano. And the fact that he won 3 games this year at Rutgers proves how wrong Tennessee was. I think that Josh Heupel's probably a bad hire, but the idea that Greg Schiano in the SEC would be doing way better than that, I don't see any evidence that proves that will make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, I also want to give a shout out to my friends at Marlowe's Tavern for a moment. Y'all have been hearing me talk the last few days about the Ribs and Whiskey event. There at Marlowe's Tavern, one of my favorite events that you get a chance to do. It's the seasonal promotion they do around this time each and every year. Well, earlier this week, I got a chance to go visit one of the taverns right there near me in my neighborhood. I'll show you a couple photos here for a moment of me really chomping down and enjoying some ribs, enjoying a little bit of whiskey. Can we show some of this here for a moment? Yeah, there you go. There's me with the ribs, kind of getting an early. A lot of folks have been talking about, kind of smoking some hog here this weekend, getting ready for the Arkansas game. I got an early start on that there at Marlowe's Tavern a little earlier this weekend. Of course, the entire family having a good time there on that. So still a little bit of time. I'm pretty sure this is the last weekend for Ribs and Whiskey, so make sure you check that out at the Marlowe's Tavern closest to you. You can get it to go. You can stop by and enjoy it in the dining room or on the patio, as we did a little earlier this week. So check out marlowstavern.com for more on that, and enjoy the Ribs and Whiskey event and all the chef-inspired food and delicious craft cocktails that are available at Marlowe's Tavern all year long. Okay, so this turned out to be a little bit of a marathon show, but I do want to finish the week off in style because we got some of the best Golden Shoe submissions that we've gotten. And I want to make sure we honor all of those right now. First of all, a couple of follow-ups to previous Golden Shoe winners. Let me show you the first one here because I thought this was really, really hilarious. Our buddy Sugar Ray the other day won the Golden Shoe. And so he wrote back to say, I want to thank DawgNation Daily and Brandon Adams for this great award. I couldn't do it without the show and our Georgia Bulldogs. For those of you not watching on video, here is Sugar Ray in a Georgia-style tuxedo with a whole bunch of golden shoes in front of him like he won a bunch of Oscars. This is one of the funniest things, and a terrific job by Sugar Ray on all of that. I had to highlight this in the show because I just thought that was just so funny. Also, another throwback to a previous Golden Shoe winner, our buddy Arnold Santiago, who shout out the Atlanta Braves yesterday. We honored him for that. He wrote in to say, thanks for the Golden Shoe Award today. Honored and so appreciative. And he says the Braves also did it. And that's the video that they captured last night, being there, or at least one of his family members did, being there at Truist Park as the Braves won the National League East on UGA night there at Truist Park. And, of course, some of y'all were having fun with me on this last night as well, because I was decked out in Braves gear, including my Braves jersey, as we were doing Cover 4 live last night. Our buddy Brandon, same name as me, of course, on Twitter shared this. He said, the moment the DawgNation Daily really just wants to watch the Braves clinch the division. And one of the commenters said, Brandon himself, I'll give you the Braves updates. You can just focus on the camera. So what happens there on Cover 4 Live is I got the TV off to my left, and so I'm kind of turning and looking at that and trying to keep the conversation going. And so Brandon was having some fun with me on Cover 4 Live about that last night, and I had a good time decked out in Braves gear as we get ready for a really fun ride through the month of October. Now some more Golden Shoe submissions today, including some of the best stuff we've gotten. How about our buddy Jermaine King here for a moment? Now we got to stay on this for a minute. He says, I'm watching Cover 4 and trying to win a Golden Shoe on a Thursday night. Look at this work of art. So you got me on the left. First of all, that's my kind of like Twitter picture, which is at this point in time more than 5 years old. It's probably about time to update the Twitter picture, to be completely honest with you. So you've got me saying, now that's how you barbecue a hog. You've got the hog on the spit there being, rotated. You've got Sam Pittman instead of the yes, sir, giving you a no, sir, the Shack barbecue. This is incredible by Jermaine. I mean, how about this is frame-worthy. I believe I may put this in my house. This is really pretty remarkable. And that is pretty clearly Golden Shoe-worthy for Jermaine. So really good stuff there. How about our next one here? William at GTKiller82 gives you kind of a bug-eyed Miss Piggy saying, when Arkansas fans see that Georgia D, yeah, you better believe the look on Miss Piggy's face may be pretty appropriate for the Hogs there on that one. That's really good for William there, too. And I believe we also have a submission from our buddy Forrester Dog there as well. Now, if you're not watching a video, I got to explain this to you. There's that Heisman House commercial now where, Aubie and Bo Jackson go out there and throw the toilet paper on the trees. And what Forrester Dog has done is kind of change the caption on this. So it's actually Auburn celebrating a fluke play, escape win against Georgia State. Forrester Dog is really, really talented. This one is really, really good. We've had some just tremendous Golden Shoes here for this week. And if I haven't honored them all, and I think there's a chance that I haven't, I certainly apologize for that. We've been overwhelmed by so many good ones. But thank you so much for the tremendous submissions there. What a fun way to close out what has been a fun week for us, getting ready for the big one on Saturday between Georgia and Arkansas. One brief final thought here before we get ready to wrap up the show today as well. So I saw where Bud Elliott last night on Twitter, and Bud's a Florida State fan. He's made no bones about that. He's very open about that. Miami, he was watching that game on TV last night, and one of the things that Bud, who I respect, works for 24/7 Sports, one of the things that he said on Twitter was, he says, it's kind of crazy that Florida State's best player and Miami's best player were both on the Georgia defense last year, referencing what Tyreek Stevenson's currently doing for Miami, what Jermaine Johnson's currently doing for Florida State. And then somebody in the comments said, in one of the replies to his tweet said, don't forget about what Otis Reese is doing at Ole Miss right now, too. A big part of that defense. And in reading this, I was just thinking about how it is kind of amazing that the Georgia defense right now is busting at the seams with talent, and yet you got like so much talent that it's spilled over to these other programs here this year in college football through the transfer portal. Like Kirby Smart's way is working. Acquiring that elite talent, putting it on the field, it's creating something pretty special in Athens right now. We'll see it Saturday against Arkansas, and for our Gator Hater Countdown, we'll see it 29 days from now against the Gators, and can't wait to see how all that unfolds. Y'all enjoy the game for the Dogs on Saturday. Be there, be elite, as Kirby Smart's challenging you to. We'll talk about a big win back on Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. We shall see you then. And on video. Yeah, there you go. Jermaine King, man. And I'm sure he's in the comment section right now. This is splendid. I mean, this is really, really pretty remarkable. So I'm very happy with all of that. But as I said before, I've been thinking about this for a while. Like, I got to do a new Twitter picture. Now, the issue here is not the fact that I'm that vain. I've been trying to keep the younger picture and make people think I'm younger than I really am. The issue is I just don't ever change anything on social media. Like, my wife gives me a hard time. Like, I almost never use Facebook other than to just do this show. My wife says that my Facebook header is me with my son before my daughter was even born. Like, she's like, one day your daughter's going to see that you have only you and your son on Facebook, and she's going to wonder, is she not loved? Which obviously she very much is. I just have never changed any of my social media stuff. So I'm going to have to change the Twitter profile picture here at some point in time. I guess there was a part of me that has kind of put off doing this because I was so much fatter than I was in that original picture there. I was only about 210 pounds in that picture, so I was kind of that's not a bad weight at that particular point in time. I'm a little heavier. I had been a lot heavier than that for a while, so maybe now it's about time to kind of show off a little bit grayer hair, a little bit old, 5-6 years older, kind of show that off a little bit. It may be about time to do that. But nonetheless, Jermaine King, very, very good stuff all the way around. This was a marathon show and fun stuff all the way around. And we got it. We had a really good time there. So we'll take a few comments. We'll get ready to wrap up today and let y'all get going there on a Friday. DawgNation.com to begin things. Brian Whitehead said, I love marathon shows. I'm really glad to hear you say that. Appreciate that. JD Dogwalker also celebrating Sugar Ray there. That was very funny. For something about the tuxedo and all the golden shoes. That was really very funny. Also, a lot of folks giving our buddy Jermaine some credit for a terrific edit. Yeah, it's really, really, really sharp stuff. We've had a few that will always kind of stick with me, and that's one that'll definitely stick with me. Allison Scaley also giving a little bit of credit there as well. Randy Hall going to be going to the Buford game tonight. That should be fun to see. Allison also says that Luther Burden will be an incredible get. No doubt about that. No question about that. It's also fun to hear Jeff, kind of update all those big recruiting topics and storylines. Very, very big deal. Randy Hall asking about Travis Shaw and a possible flip there. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard much about that, but obviously that was a recruit that I loved. But you kind of wonder how much the in-state pull kind of matters there and all that. Al Clements says the UGA defense is really shaking up our competition. This is on Facebook. I think that's true. Chris Slim White brings up a good point that the picture has been up for such a long time. People are going to think I've been hacked if I change the picture. That's probably true. For some reason, I just don't mess around with that kind of stuff probably as much as I probably should, especially given the fact that it's kind of a professional, kind of a forward-facing type thing there. But yeah, that's probably true. Steve Shaffini, I'm not going to read that, but that's very funny. That's very funny from Steve. I'm actually happy to have Steve in the comment section too. It's been kind of nice. I feel like we kind of went a while without seeing him, but now he's back there. Calvin Sanders and talking about Julio Jones now in Tennessee. Yeah, I mean, listen, I love Julio, and I've enjoyed Matt Ryan too. I think the biggest blunder the Falcons ever made was giving those big contract extensions to both those guys. It just really was. And, I think the jury is still out on what Arthur Smith is, but they've had so many chances to reboot the organization and be bad for a little while. And they just haven't taken it. So then now you wonder if you're just prolonging the inevitable. And by the way, so if you're going to do the opposite of that, if you wanted to build your team around Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, they should have traded their whole draft for Chase Young a couple of years ago, and at least have the dynamic player to go along with Grady Jarrett on the defense and try to get something done while you still had those guys. So it's almost like they've done neither, right? It's like too much ego to admit they made a mistake by re-upping Julio and Matt, and then too much ego to ignore the fact that they didn't have anywhere near enough around them to truly compete. It's just kind of a mess. That's a messy organization. Al Clements asking about the JT Daniels injury. I mean, if I had to assume, I guess I'm going to assume Daniels is fine. Maybe I'll be disappointed tomorrow, but if I had to assume, he's probably fine. This is totally fair. Harsh but fair here. Let me read this comment. John Nail says, which way are you going to go for the over-under on the UGA game so I can call Bet US and bet the house and the opposite? Totally fair. Tough but fair. I said this week, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about this. I am 0-8 picking Georgia games here this year. That's remarkable. It's amazing. I actually feel like my picks overall have been doing okay. I can't get anything right with Georgia, and it's not like they're the same kind of errors. It's not like I'm always picking Georgia to cover as a homer, and they're not doing that. I have picked them to cover, and they didn't. I have gone against them with the spread, and they have. I've been on both sides of the over-under. I'm just guessing wrong over and over again to the point now where it just feels like I'm grasping at straws. But Other than that, I feel like my picks are actually kind of doing okay. I cannot buy a pick in this Georgia game. So if you really want to, really line yourself up on this, I was Georgia minus the points and the under, which is kind of a tricky, thing to be there. But yeah, that's kind of where we are at this point now, where I'm just getting hammered on these Georgia picks. Bill Sanders, who I saw last week at Warner Robins, said his game this night's a big one in 3A. How about Crisp County and Mary Persons? Boy, that is a big one. Billy Hurley, I appreciate the kind words on that, and he says the recruiting information makes him feel like he just shotgun 3 Classic City Loggers. I'm really happy to hear you say that. Calvin Sanders says we can thank Thomas Dimitrov for those bad contracts. Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, that's going to be his lasting legacy, unfortunately. Ooh, Isaac Cruz noticed something. So I did take the McDonald's Tennessee money bag off the table. I didn't know if that wasn't quite as relevant anymore. We're also getting ready to move here too, so we're kind of rearranging some things. So if you want me to put that back, I will. I just didn't know if people had kind of forgotten about that now. But I did move that. I'm glad you noticed though. Darius Brown mentioning Robert Beal, very impressive. It was nice to see Beal get involved and get a big play last week. That was kind of cool. All right, let's look at else. Scott Pete says JT throws 3 touchdowns minimum. I kind of think that. Scott Harris says I'm the Lee Corso of DawgNation. Maybe one of these days I'll get my mascot head to put on at the end of the show. David Stanscu, I hope I pronounced that correct, says, where do we do the show? We are right here in kind of like the suburban Atlanta area. So, I'm like probably an hour and a half or so from Athens, but we're kind of like in this suburban Atlanta area, actually getting ready to move to a new studio, just kind of down the road. Jacob Phillips says, do you think Arkansas runs for more or less than 100 yards? I mean, I guess it depends on how many times they try to carry the ball. I mean, ultimately, I think less is probably a decent bet on that, although 100 yards is still a pretty meager total depending on how the game goes. Like the one thing I don't believe Arkansas is going to be able to do is just kind of line it up offensively, whether it be running plays or passing plays, whatever else. They're not going to nibble Georgia 4 and 5 yards at a time. I just don't believe they're capable of doing that. That the sum total of the offense for Arkansas, if they have any, is going to be those few big chunk plays they maybe get with a guy like Traylon Burks, and you may have to take a lot of swings and misses in the hopes you get a couple of those home runs. If I'm Arkansas, that's probably my chance on Saturday, I would probably say. Green Soldier says there's been some Arkansas fan smack talk this week. That's kind of interesting. He says it's unreal how much confidence they have. Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is it's like everybody wants to talk a little trash, right? It's like, deep down, do Arkansas fans know what's coming their way? Maybe they do, but they haven't been in this spot in a while, and so everybody wants to kind of feel like they're a part of the SEC story. So I guess I'm not too worried about that. But it is kind of funny to think that sometimes you're left to wonder where does that confidence come from. But I guess everybody wants to feel good about their team. Dallas Schwartz says, is the SEC Country app going to get updated? That's a good question. So I would say that we have plans for a lot of the social platforms there because we're just kind of getting back going on that, right? I mean, we're still relatively new in that with everything else we have going on at DawgNation. I don't know about the SEC Country app. That's a good question. I'm not quite sure how much that's going to be updated, but we do have big plans for a lot of the other social channels. And so we'll tell you more about that, Dallas. I appreciate you being interested, and I appreciate you being here today. So we'll tell you more about that as time goes on, but I don't really know how much of that's going to be on the SEC Country app. And just to be frank, it's because we only have so many hands, around here to even, contribute on something like that. And that's just the honest truth on that. So Gordon says, what's the update on Kendall Milton? Haven't heard much new on him today this week, other than, he traveled to Vanderbilt and was just held out, kind of on a cautionary basis. So, it seems like he could have maybe played last week. And so my assumption is he'll play on Saturday and probably be fine. That was dealing with a little bit of a shoulder thing last week, but, kind of only missed the game because of the nature of the opponent. Let's see what else. By the way, I guess we've had Jason Rhodes in here today, kind of talking things up from the Arkansas side of stuff. And Jason, we're glad to have you here. My request would be stop back by and see us on Monday, one way or another. But we're happy to have you here today. Good to see Christian here there as well. Richard D says, how about the Georgia-Florida game? Yeah, we've had some meetings on that. I'm not quite so sure how that's going to unfold right now. It could be that we do something kind of unofficial there, but we do have something really, really big at some point in time coming up that I can't tell you about yet. It may not be for Georgia-Florida, but it will be for something pretty big at some point in time there. Let me get one more trip around the sun here, and then we'll get ready to go. Chris Slim White's got Cook for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Zamir White for 87 yards and a touchdown. That's good stuff. Robert Reynolds says, where are we moving to? Just down the road. We're like in that sort of like Dunwoody, Sandy Springs area. We're just down the road. Just kind of going down the road. Brandon Griffin says, play soft coverage and force Arkansas to play small ball. We'll see if that happens. Dan Patrick enjoying the new hype video for Georgia. I'm glad to hear that. Isaac Cruz says, did I give my prediction? He says, I got Dogs like 35-7. That's about what I would think. I'm thinking someone in the neighborhood of like 35-10, maybe 35-13, something like that. That's about what I'm thinking. I said this during the regular show that very simply, I want the Dogs in the 30s. I want the Hogs in the teens, right? 30-something to 10, 30-something to 13, whatever else. Dogs in the 30s, Hogs in the teens. That's about where I want this game to be on Saturday. And that's kind of a simple wish here. Matt Rukavina says the Port can't handle the heat. Dogs 17-3 at the half, 34-10 the final. So it sounds like Matt's kind of in the same spot as us on that. Philip Jordan Wells calls it a gentleman's blowout. That's really funny. Yeah, that may be the case. All right, we got to go. Really good stuff. Thanks all of you for being here. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll see you tonight, Peachtree TV, for Trinity Christian and Eagles Landing Christian Academy, top 2 teams in the single A private classification in the state of Georgia. That is going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, in Athens, we'll have Kroger kickoff before the game. We'll have DawgNation post-game show from UGA Bookstore after the game. We'll be all over the place during the game. And so, good stuff. Have a great weekend. Thanks for being here for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Go with the Flow, presented by R.S. Andrews returns this afternoon on the DawgNation video channels. And they can also help you with your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. Just find them online at rsandrews.com. Enjoy the weekend. We'll see you Monday. DawgNation Daily, presented by Kroger. 9:45 for our first and 15. 10 a.m. for the show after that. We'll talk to you Monday, everybody.